A neglected German shepherd, silent and broken, had been abandoned in the shelter for days. No one dared to approach him until one man arrived. What started as a simple act of kindness would transform both their lives. This is a story of healing, trust, and the profound bond that grows when two broken souls find each other. The shelter was cold that day. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a dull, unnatural glow over the rows of cages. Each contained a dog, some barking for attention, others cowering in fear. But in the farthest corner of the shelter, there was a German shepherd who was different from the rest. His name was Hunter, and he hadn't made a sound for days. The staff noticed it too. At first, it seemed like a minor quirk. Maybe he was just adjusting to the environment, they thought. But as the days passed, the silence grew heavier. The other dogs would wag their tails, sniff the bars of their cages, or bark at anyone who passed by, eager for human interaction. But Hunter just sat there. His fur was matted, his eyes dull, and his body stiff with tension. His ears, once alert and proud, hung low. He didn't even look at the staff when they walked by with food or water. Poor thing. Maria, one of the shelter workers, whispered to her colleague as she passed his cage. He's been through something terrible. The shelter had become his prison. He had been dropped off just days earlier, a stray with no name, no history. His body bore the marks of abuse, and his eyes held a sadness so deep that it seemed impossible for anyone to ever reach him. The first few days, they had tried to coax him out of his shell with treats, toys, and gentle words. But nothing worked. He was unreachable. Maria sat by his cage during her break, staring at him through the bars. His fur was disheveled, his ribs visible beneath his coat. There was something in his eyes, a hollow emptiness that she couldn't shake. She had seen dogs who were shy, dogs who had suffered, but Hunter was different. He wasn't just sad. He was resigned. For the next few days, the silence continued. The shelter filled with the sounds of barking, whining, and the busy chatter of staff members, but Hunter's corner remained undisturbed. He did not react when people came or went, when new dogs arrived, or when visitors passed by. It was as if he was invisible, fading into the background, a shadow of the dog he used to be. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and the shelter emptied out, a man walked in. His name was Alex. He had come in earlier that day to volunteer for the evening shift, a routine he had been following for months now. But that night, something was different. When he walked through the front doors, the air felt heavier, more charged. His usual enthusiasm to help the animals seemed distant, clouded by something he couldn't quite name. Alex had always loved animals, especially dogs. They had a way of connecting with him that nothing else did. He wasn't the type of person to shy away from the shelter's quieter residents, the ones who had been abandoned or mistreated. He knew how to approach them gently, with patience. But as he walked down the narrow aisle of cages, he couldn't help but feel a pull toward the back corner, toward Hunter. He stopped at the cage, his hand resting against the bars, studying the dog. Hunter sat there, still as a statue, eyes locked ahead. His fur, though dirty and ragged, had an undeniable sheen to it. He had once been a proud dog, Alex could tell. But now he was just a shell. "Hey there," Alex murmured softly, his voice steady but filled with a quiet tenderness. "How's it going, buddy?" Hunter didn't react. Alex tried again, a little louder this time. "You're a strong boy, aren't you? I bet you've been through a lot, huh?" Still nothing. The dog didn't flinch, didn't twitch an ear. Alex sighed, the sadness in Hunter's eyes mirroring something in his own heart. It was a familiar feeling, one that Alex had tried to bury over the years. But standing in front of this dog, so broken, so silent, he felt it come rushing back. "You're not alone anymore," Alex whispered, more to himself than the dog. He knew that for a dog like Hunter, the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But he also knew that every dog deserved a chance to heal, to feel safe, to trust again. Maybe it wouldn't be him who would heal Hunter. Maybe it would take time. But he wasn't about to let the dog slip away into the silence of the shelter unnoticed. As he stood there, his fingers gently brushing the bars of the cage, he saw something change in Hunter's eyes. For the briefest moment, a flicker of recognition. A silent plea, perhaps. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. Alex reached for the leash hanging beside the door. He didn't know what he was going to do yet, but he knew he couldn't leave without trying. There was something about Hunter that called to him, something that needed to be saved. He pulled the leash over his shoulder and, for the first time in days, locked eyes with the silent dog. "I'm coming back for you, Hunter," he said softly, his voice firm with a quiet resolve. "You're not going to be alone anymore." But little did Alex know, the real journey was just about to begin. The next day, Alex arrived at the shelter with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. As soon as he entered, he made a beeline for Hunter's cage, his heart pounding in anticipation. He had thought about the dog all night, and now he was determined to give him a chance, no matter what. Maria, who was working the front desk that morning, noticed him right away. She raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised by the intensity in his step. "You're back early," she remarked, her voice light but curious. Alex didn't respond immediately. Instead, his gaze was fixed on Hunter, who remained perfectly still in the corner of the cage. He walked up to the bars, and this time, instead of speaking, he simply knelt down to the dog's level. His heart clenched at the sight of the German shepherd's dull, lifeless eyes, but there was something else too, something deeper. A thread of connection, however faint, had been tugged during their brief encounter the day before. Maria noticed Alex's focus and stepped closer. "He hasn't made a sound since he got here," she said quietly. "You know, the staff have been trying for days to engage him. Some of the dogs here have trauma, sure, but none like this. He's not just quiet. He's completely withdrawn." Alex nodded, his hand resting on the cool metal of the cage. "I know. I could feel it too." There was something unnervingly familiar about the way Hunter had shut himself off from the world. It was as if the dog had given up on ever being seen, ever being loved. Alex thought about his own past, how he had once felt so lost, so numb to everything around him. He couldn't help but wonder if Hunter felt the same way. "I want to take him out for a walk," Alex said, his voice quiet but firm. Maria hesitated, looking at Hunter with concern. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. He's unpredictable, Alex. If he's this withdrawn, he might lash out. You've got to be careful." "I can handle it," Alex replied, his voice steady. "I've worked with dogs like him before. I'm not going to force him, but I think he deserves the chance to breathe outside of this cage." Maria considered him for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "Okay. But if he reacts badly, you call for help." Got it," Alex said, already reaching for the leash. He slipped it onto Hunter's collar gently, moving slowly to avoid startling the dog. Hunter didn't flinch or resist. He simply allowed the leash to be attached, as if the motion had become something automatic. Alex opened the cage door, stepping back to give the dog some space. But instead of retreating to the farthest corner as expected, Hunter stood up, slowly, cautiously. His movements were stiff, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to move at all. Alex waited for a moment, giving Hunter time to adjust. He could see the hesitation in the dog's eyes, the internal battle between the instinct to run and the longing for something more. Something had shifted in the last 24 hours. Whether it was the brief connection they shared the day before, or the simple act of allowing Hunter to make the choice to move, Alex couldn't say. But something had sparked. "Come on, boy," Alex whispered, giving a small tug on the leash, just enough to encourage him without forcing him. "You're safe with me." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, Hunter took a shaky step forward, followed by another. Alex's heart leapt in his chest, but he remained calm, careful not to push him too hard. Slowly, like a man taking his first steps out of a dark tunnel, Hunter moved closer to Alex. His tail, once limp and unmoving, gave the faintest of twitches. Maria watched from a distance, her expression softening. She had never seen Hunter move like this before, not since he had been dropped off at the shelter. For the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. They made their way outside, the cold morning air hitting Alex's face like a wave. The shelter's yard was small, enclosed by a high chain-link fence, but it was enough space for a dog to get a taste of freedom. Hunter took tentative steps, his paws crunching against the gravel as they moved together, Alex walking just a few steps ahead, making sure to stay at a pace that allowed Hunter to catch up at his own pace. It wasn't much, just a short walk around the yard, a few minutes of fresh air, but it was the first real sign of life Alex had seen in Hunter since he arrived. The dog seemed to relax, if only slightly, his body less stiff, his movements more fluid. After a few minutes, Alex stopped, letting Hunter lead the way. He didn't speak, just waited. And then, without warning, Hunter stopped in his tracks, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Alex watched in silence, his heart in his throat. The dog's body seemed to shift, his ears perking up, as if he had heard something, something that only he could hear. Hunter turned his head toward Alex, his eyes softening, and for the first time, Alex saw something like recognition in them. It wasn't a joyful wag of the tail or a leap toward him, but it was enough. It was a promise, maybe a quiet one, but a promise nonetheless. Alex crouched down, reaching out slowly to stroke the dog's fur. "Good boy," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. "You're doing great. We're going to take this one step at a time." As the two stood there, surrounded by the quiet of the shelter's yard, Alex couldn't help but wonder about Hunter's past. What had this dog been through? What had broken him so completely that he had withdrawn into himself, choosing silence over connection? Alex didn't have the answers, but he was determined to find them. And he was determined to help Hunter find his voice again. But what Alex didn't know was that the road ahead would be much longer than he anticipated. Hunter's past was darker than he could ever have imagined. And the deeper they went into each other's lives, the more both of them would learn about the power of healing, the weight of trauma, and the extraordinary bond that could form between a broken man and a broken dog. Over the next few days, Alex continued to visit the shelter every morning, determined to help Hunter. But the progress, though real, was slow. Each step forward was earned, each moment of connection hard-won. Hunter was still distant, still cautious. His tail, once completely still, would occasionally twitch, but it wasn't the exuberant wag of a dog eager to be loved. It was more like a tentative greeting, a flicker of hope in a world that had taught him silence. Each day, Alex walked Hunter, but it was clear that the dog had a deep mistrust of the world around him. He would follow Alex, but only just enough to stay within the safety of his presence. The yard was a small patch of freedom, but it didn't compare to the wide open fields that most dogs longed to roam. Hunter's eyes would sometimes wander to the perimeter of the yard, looking past the fence as if searching for something or someone. But every time Alex would gently guide him back, the dog would allow it, his gaze shifting back to the ground, as if resigning himself to whatever came next. Maria, who had started to watch their progress closely, noticed the subtle changes in Hunter. "You're making a difference," she remarked one morning, handing Alex a small bag of treats for Hunter. "I can see it, even if he's still not talking to anyone else." Alex offered a tired smile, but said nothing. What could he say? He had hoped to see more progress by now, but all he had was a small flicker of trust, a glimmer that barely lit the way forward. He'd spent his days trying to help Hunter heal, but it wasn't just the dog that needed healing. Alex had his own wounds, ones that he wasn't quite ready to face. He thought of his time in the military, the mission that had gone wrong, and the scars it had left on him, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Alex hadn't told anyone about the darkness that followed him home after he left the army. He had tried to bury it under work, under the routine, under the years of living alone. He hadn't expected a dog, a shelter dog of all things, to be the one who finally broke the walls he had built around his heart. But every time he looked into Hunter's eyes, he saw more than just a broken dog. He saw a reflection of himself, a man who had retreated into himself, refusing to trust, refusing to feel, afraid of being hurt again. Maybe it was because of this shared pain that Alex couldn't walk away. Maybe it was because, deep down, he knew that if Hunter could find a way to trust again, so could he. On the 6th day of their walks, something changed. Alex had been talking to Hunter as they strolled around the yard, his words soft, encouraging, nothing too profound, just the everyday chatter of a man and a dog learning to trust each other. But today, for the first time, Hunter didn't just walk beside him. He stopped, his nose twitching again, and looked up at Alex with a strange intensity in his eyes. For a brief moment, it was like the silence between them cracked, and Alex's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't much, but it was something, a small piece of communication, a break in the ice that had been holding them both captive for so long. Alex stopped and knelt down, meeting Hunter's gaze. "What is it, boy? What are you looking for?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hunter didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, his eyes locked on Alex's, as if trying to decide if this moment was real, if it was safe. And then, almost imperceptibly, his tail gave a small wag, a hesitant one, but a wag nonetheless. Alex's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a triumphant moment, and it certainly wasn't the beginning of a perfect bond. But it was a step, a small, fragile step forward. Hunter nudged Alex's hand with his nose, his body language soft, inviting the touch that he had so desperately avoided before. Alex's hand shook slightly as he reached out, but he kept it steady, letting Hunter make the choice. Slowly, the dog leaned into his touch, the contact between them warm, grounding. The moment felt sacred, and for the first time since he had arrived at the shelter, Alex allowed himself to relax, to let go of the tension that had been building inside him. This wasn't just about saving a dog anymore. It was about finding something within himself that he thought had been lost forever. "Good boy, Hunter," Alex whispered, his voice thick with emotion. It wasn't much. It wasn't even close to the miracle that he had hoped for when he first came to the shelter. But it was enough. It was a beginning. As they walked back to the shelter, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were both on the edge of something larger than either of them. He didn't know where it would lead or how long it would take to get there. But he knew this much: there was no turning back now. When they returned to Hunter's cage, the dog didn't retreat to the far corner like he usually did. Instead, he stayed near the door, watching Alex as if waiting for something. Alex knelt down again, his hand reaching through the bars. Hunter bumped his nose against Alex's hand, his eyes soft and searching, as if asking, "Is this it? Is this what I've been waiting for?" Alex's heart swelled, and he leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the bars. "I'm not going anywhere, Hunter," he promised softly. Not this time. It was a quiet vow, but one that Alex meant with every part of himself. Because in that moment, he realized that they were both in this together. Alex stood, his legs aching, but his spirit lighter than it had been in years. For the first time since his life had fallen apart, there was a sense of direction, a sense of purpose. And maybe, just maybe, he and Hunter would both find a way to heal together. The days that followed felt like they were stretching out, like time was moving both too fast and too slow. Every morning, Alex continued his visits to the shelter, his bond with Hunter growing with each passing moment. They were becoming a team, each one drawing strength from the other. But as much as Hunter seemed to be opening up, there were still moments of hesitation, of wariness in his eyes, old scars that Alex couldn't see, but could feel in every unspoken gesture. One chilly morning, as Alex arrived at the shelter, he noticed Hunter pacing in his kennel, a low whine escaping his throat. The moment Alex stepped inside, Hunter's ears perked up, his body tensing, but this time, he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a few cautious steps toward the bars, eyes locked on Alex's face. Alex's heart raced. He knew that look, that mixture of hope and fear. The dog wanted something, but was unsure whether it was safe to ask for it. "Hey, buddy," Alex said softly, his voice steady. "What is it? What do you need?" Without a word, he reached through the bars of the kennel, offering his hand. Hunter didn't hesitate this time. His nose brushed Alex's palm, and the dog gently nudged his hand toward the door. It was as if Hunter had decided, once and for all, that this time, he was going to trust. With a quiet click, Alex unlocked the kennel and opened the door. Hunter hesitated only for a split second before he stepped out, walking slowly but purposefully toward Alex. The dog's body language was calm, but Alex could sense the weight of years of silence hanging between them. It wasn't gone. It wouldn't be gone for a while. But this small step was everything. Alex leaned down and gently ran his fingers through Hunter's fur. "We're going to take it slow," he whispered, "one day at a time." As they walked out into the yard, the air crisp with the early morning fog, Alex noticed how the dog's body was still rigid, the old habits of wariness and self-protection still deeply ingrained. It was clear that while Hunter might have been willing to try again, he wasn't ready to fully let go of the past just yet. Alex understood. He'd spent years doing the same, burying his past, pretending it didn't haunt him. But being with Hunter, seeing the dog's gradual shift, made him realize how much he'd been avoiding the one thing that could help him heal, confronting the ghosts that had been chasing him since his time in the army. Alex had never told anyone about his time in combat, never let himself talk about the things he'd seen, the things he'd done. He had buried those memories in the deepest corners of his mind, hoping they would disappear, that they would fade with time. But time didn't heal everything. Time just made the memories quieter, more insistent in their silence. Hunter's past wasn't unlike his own. The dog had been through things that no one should have to endure: lost comrades, harsh conditions, a life of service that hadn't asked for a return. And yet, just like Alex, Hunter was still here, still breathing, still fighting. They made their way across the yard, the sound of their footsteps the only thing breaking the stillness. And with each step, Alex felt something inside of him stir, a sense of recognition, of understanding. Hunter was teaching him, in his own way, that healing wasn't about running away from the pain. It was about facing it, learning to live with it. Alex stopped at the edge of the yard, looking out toward the small forest beyond the shelter. "You know, I used to be afraid to feel anything," he confessed softly, more to himself than to Hunter. "I thought if I just kept moving, kept doing, I wouldn't have to deal with all the stuff I left behind." Hunter paused beside him, looking out at the trees, his eyes scanning the woods like a sentry on watch. Alex couldn't help but smile at the dog's determination to protect, even from a distance. "I was wrong," Alex continued, his voice quiet but resolute. "It's not about running from the past. It's about letting it make us stronger. And I'm not going to let it break me anymore, Hunter." The dog didn't respond with a bark or a wag of his tail, but Alex felt the connection between them deepen. There was an understanding there, unspoken but undeniable. They were both survivors, in their own ways. As they walked back toward the shelter, Alex thought about how far they had come. But he also knew there was still a long road ahead. Hunter wasn't healed, not by a long shot. And neither was Alex. But they were making progress, together. That evening, after their walk, Alex sat down beside Hunter's kennel, watching the dog as he laid down on his blanket. There was something peaceful about the moment, the stillness that had settled between them. For the first time in days, Alex felt like he could breathe a little easier. But just as he was about to get up and leave for the night, he heard a soft noise, a faint rustling from the corner of the room. He turned, and to his surprise, Hunter was standing up, slowly walking toward the door of his kennel. His tail was tucked low, his eyes scanning the room, but there was no hesitation this time. Alex's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a big move, not yet, but it was something more than the silence he had known for so long. It was a sign that Hunter, just like him, was beginning to trust again. The dog stopped at the door, waiting. With a soft smile, Alex stood up and opened the door. "Come on, Hunter," he said, his voice low. "Let's go home." The dog stepped forward, his movements slow but steady, and together they walked out into the night, a little closer to finding peace, a little closer to healing. The days after that quiet evening felt like the first rays of sunlight after a long, stormy night. Alex and Hunter settled into a rhythm. The dog had begun to show more signs of comfort, though the shadows of his past still lingered in the way he watched the door or the way he flinched at loud sounds. Every small victory was hard-won, but it meant something. It meant that the bond they were building was real. As the weeks passed, Alex found himself more at peace than he had been in years. He had started to talk to Hunter more, telling him about the things that had been buried in his heart for so long, the things he hadn't shared with anyone else. And while Hunter didn't speak back, the way the dog listened, the way he sat beside Alex during the long nights when the memories threatened to rise again, made all the difference. One morning, Alex took Hunter on a long walk through the woods near his home, a trail they'd walked before, but today felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, like the earth itself was holding its breath. The path was overgrown, wildflowers brushing against their legs, and the scent of pine mixed with damp soil. "Today feels like a good day, huh, buddy?" Alex said as they walked side by side. Hunter's ears perked up at the sound of his voice, his pace steady but still cautious. He wasn't running ahead like some dogs might. Instead, he stayed close, every step measured. Alex didn't mind. He had learned to understand that Hunter's pace, his way of moving through the world, was part of what made him who he was. And Alex had long since accepted that he wasn't in a hurry. Not anymore. They stopped at the edge of the forest, looking out over a small creek that trickled through the land. The sun filtered through the trees, casting long, soft shadows on the ground. Hunter sat down, his eyes scanning the area, a silent sentinel. For a moment, Alex wondered if the dog was searching for something, some part of himself that was still missing. But then, in a moment of rare vulnerability, Hunter looked up at Alex, his gaze soft but steady, as if to say, "I'm here now. I'm with you." It was a look that pierced Alex's heart, a silent promise that whatever had happened in the past, whatever they both carried with them, didn't have to define them anymore. Alex sat beside the dog, his legs stretched out on the cool earth. He reached out and scratched behind Hunter's ears, the way the dog seemed to relax under his touch, making Alex smile. "I know you're not a fan of being around too many people, huh?" Alex said with a chuckle. "I get it. I've been there." For a moment, Alex allowed himself to let go of the tightness in his chest that had plagued him for so long. He didn't have to hide anymore. And neither did Hunter. The peaceful silence between them was interrupted by the distant sound of a car engine. Alex's instincts tensed, but Hunter didn't react. He simply turned his head toward the sound, then looked back at Alex, as if waiting for his cue. Alex smiled at him, a soft, knowing smile. "I know, buddy," Alex said. "We don't have to rush." They sat there together for what felt like hours, the days slipping away as the world turned quietly around them. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, a sudden change in the air caught Alex's attention. His instincts flared, and his gaze shot up. A figure appeared on the path ahead. At first, Alex thought it was just someone passing by, but something about the man's walk, the deliberate, almost hesitant steps, caught his attention. The man stopped when he saw them, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of Hunter. Alex's breath caught in his throat as the figure took a step closer. Hunter, sensing the change in the air, stood up immediately. His body was rigid, his gaze focused, but there was no sign of aggression, just wariness. Alex stayed perfectly still, watching the man's every movement, a protective instinct rising within him. The man stopped a few feet away, his eyes on Hunter. Is that my dog?" His voice was hoarse, like it hadn't been used in a long time. Alex stood up slowly, his heart racing. "What do you mean, your dog?" The man's face softened with recognition, his eyes filling with emotion. "That's Hunter. He was my partner. My canine partner." Alex's heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "I rescued him from the shelter. He's been with me for months." The man stepped closer, his hands outstretched. "I was his handler," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm Mark here. I served with Hunter in Kandahar. He saved my life. We were separated when I was injured. I thought I'd lost him forever." Alex's mind reeled. He had heard of veterans who had been reunited with their service dogs, but he never expected it to happen like this. Never expected to come face to face with the person who had once been Hunter's handler. Hunter had been silent until now, but as Mark spoke, the dog's tail slowly began to wag, his body relaxing just slightly. He stepped toward Mark, then stopped, as if unsure. "Hunter," Mark whispered, kneeling down. "It's me, buddy." The dog's hesitation lasted only a moment before he took a few slow steps toward Mark, then pressed his face against the man's chest, his body trembling slightly. It wasn't a bark or a leap. It was a quiet, slow reunion, one that spoke of years of memories, of a bond that had never truly broken. Tears welled up in Alex's eyes as he watched the two of them. He had known this moment was coming, knew that Hunter's past had been more complicated than he could have imagined. But watching it unfold in front of him, watching how Hunter's loyalty had never wavered, left him speechless. Mark looked up at Alex, his eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "I've been looking for him for so long. He was my partner, my friend. But I don't want to take him away from you." Alex swallowed hard. Hunter's not just my dog, Mark. He's more than that. He's family." The two men stood in silence, both of them knowing that the bond they shared with Hunter was something beyond words. Hunter wasn't just a dog. He was a survivor, a warrior, and a healer. And now, after all this time, he had the chance to choose. To choose the man who had given him a second chance, or the man who had once been his partner in a war-torn land. But in that moment, as the sun sank lower and the world grew quieter, Alex realized something. It didn't matter who Hunter chose. Because, in the end, it wasn't about ownership. It was about love. And Hunter had loved both of them, in his own way, in his own time. With a deep breath, Alex smiled at Mark. "He'll always be your partner, Mark," he said. "But he's also mine. And maybe, just maybe, there's room for both of us." The three of them stood together in the fading light, the sound of the world around them fading into the background. And for the first time in a long while, Alex felt at peace, knowing that sometimes the hardest choices were the ones that made us whole. The days after Mark's unexpected visit were a blur, a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. The bond between Alex and Hunter had been tested, stretched in ways Alex had never imagined. But it was also clearer than ever that Hunter wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol of something much greater, a reminder of the resilience it took to survive, to heal, and to move forward. Mark had left after their conversation, assuring Alex that he understood. Hunter had a new life now, one filled with care and love, with someone who understood him in ways that only time and shared experiences could teach. The final words they exchanged were simple, but they carried a weight that would linger for a long time. "I'm glad you found each other," Mark had said, his voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "Take care of him. He deserves it." Alex had nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I will. And thank you for everything." As the days stretched on, Alex realized that the path he and Hunter had started walking wasn't just about healing for the dog. It was about healing for both of them. The bond they shared had been forged in silence and patience, in moments of quiet understanding. And now, it was growing into something even deeper. One crisp morning, as the world outside was still shrouded in a blanket of mist, Alex sat on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and orange. Hunter sat beside him, his presence as steady and constant as the rising sun. They hadn't spoken much in the last few weeks, but the silence between them felt right, comfortable, even. It was then that Alex realized how far they had both come. When Hunter had first arrived, he had been broken, guarded, silent, unwilling to trust. But now he was different. He was still cautious, still unsure of the world at times, but there was a quiet strength in the way he carried himself. The dog had found his peace, or at least was beginning to. Alex looked down at him, reaching out to gently rub behind Hunter's ears. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes closing in contentment. "You've come a long way, huh, buddy?" Alex murmured, his voice soft with emotion. "You were just like me, stuck in the past, afraid of moving forward. But look at you now." Hunter's tail thumped against the ground softly, the only response he needed to give. For a while, they sat there, just watching the world wake up around them. And in that stillness, Alex realized that healing wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a long process, a slow rebuilding of trust and strength. It was moments like this, quiet, unspoken, that showed him the power of resilience. As the day wore on, they went for their usual walk, slow, deliberate steps, just like before. The path was familiar now, but it was also full of new discoveries. Alex noticed how Hunter's pace had quickened just a little over the past few weeks, how his steps had gained confidence. He wasn't just walking anymore, he was living again. Later that afternoon, Alex found himself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a piece of paper that had been lying in front of him for days. It was a letter from the local shelter, an offer to take in a new dog, one who had been abandoned and was in need of a home. They'd received several calls, they explained, asking if Alex would consider adopting again. At first, the thought had made Alex hesitant. He wasn't sure he was ready to open his heart to another dog after everything he and Hunter had been through. But then, as his eyes glanced over at Hunter, lying quietly on the rug, Alex's heart swelled with a sense of peace. "Maybe it's time," Alex murmured to himself. It wasn't about replacing anyone or filling a void. It was about giving another dog the chance that Hunter had once had. A chance for healing, for love, and for the future. The decision was made. He reached for the phone and dialed the shelter. Days later, Alex found himself standing in the same room where he had first met Hunter. Now it was another dog's turn. A quiet dog, a shy one, with eyes that seemed to hold a world of untold stories. As he crouched down, offering his hand, Alex knew he wasn't trying to heal something that had been broken. No, he was simply expanding the circle of love, the one that had started with Hunter. The dog sniffed Alex's hand cautiously, then, just like Hunter, took a small step forward. Alex smiled, watching as the new dog leaned into his touch, tentative but trusting. "You're safe now," Alex whispered. "Welcome home." And so, just like that, a new chapter began. Alex wasn't alone anymore. He had Hunter by his side, and now, another dog to help heal, to guide, and to love. It wasn't always easy, but it was real, and that was enough. Later that night, after settling the new dog into his home, Alex stepped out onto the porch, Hunter by his side. They stood together, gazing at the stars above. It was a peaceful, quiet moment, one that Alex would never take for granted. "I think we're going to be okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Hunter's tail thumped softly against the ground. It wasn't a perfect ending, nor a perfect life. But it was a life full of second chances, of quiet moments, and of the kind of love that doesn't need words to be understood.